All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into the Better Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Will Ty, and I'm so excited today to be joined by my friend Britt Flinn. She's the host of Britt's Fantasy Blitz. You can find it on the BettorSports Network. You can find her on Fantasy Alarm. You can find her on Sirius XM. You can find her on Twitter. You can find her everywhere. Britt, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going? I'm glad that we finally got the time carved out to do this because it was so fun meeting you and hanging out with you in Cleveland at the FSGA, and I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, it was a good time. Good to chop it up, talk ball. And I'm super excited that you're here for this episode in particular because we're going to be continuing our player previews for the 2023 fantasy football season, talking about each team, and we have you to talk about the Cowboys. Britt, you're a noted Cowboys fan, which, you know, I don't love because I'm a Giants fan, but that's okay. We can get by that, right?
Yeah, totally. If I can make friends with Eagles fans, I can definitely make fans or friends with Giants fans. So we're good.
Yeah. I feel like for me, I have this sort of like common enemy of my enemy is my friend thing with both Eagles and Cowboys fans, because I feel like the hate between you two are like more immense than anything that I have with anybody in the NFC.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And to make it worse, the very first NFL game that I ever went to was against the Eagles. And so that just made it even worse. Eagles fans.
They could be mean. I mean, I love my Eagles fan friends. I grew up in Jersey, so half my friends are Eagles fans, half my friends are New York fans. They're good people. They're just a little intense sometimes, we'll put it.
Yeah, when you have to grease light poles down, I mean, man, they're intense.
Yeah, it's a little next level. Okay, well, now that we've got that out of the way, we can still be friends. I was talking to Joe Volpe about this the other day because he came on for our Giants and Jets episode. He's a Patriots fan, and so we talked then about the importance of being able to put your fandom aside and look at these players objectively, because ultimately we're all trying to win fantasy football championships. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take an objective look at each player on the Cowboys. We're going to give you their ADP, their average draft position, and then Britt is going to let us know if she's going to draft or pass on that player at their current ADP. Sound good, Britt?
Yeah, that sounds great. And I have a lot of things to say about Dak, so.
You have a lot of things to say in general, but I would imagine so about your starting quarterback. So let's start off with him. Dak Prescott, currently going in round 7. That's his current ADP. Are you drafting or are you passing on Dak Prescott at that ADP?
Yeah, I think in round 7, it's a little bit too high. But the thing about his ADPs over a variety of sites is that it's all over the place. Nobody can figure out whether to be high on him or if those interceptions are going to follow him into this year. For example, on Yahoo, his ADP is 70.6. On Underdog, it's all the way down to 104. I mean, that's 34 spots. That's almost a 3-round difference in ADP. So people just can't really decide what to make of him and the interception problem that he had last year. But I think what they forget is that he was playing with basically Ceedee Lamb, Dalton Schultz was hurt, and then it was like a bunch of third stringers and XFL players or USFL, wherever Kevontae Turpin came from. And a lot of those interceptions were either tipped by the receiver or bounced off of them into the defenders. A lot of them weren't a problem, or weren't Dak didn't cause them.
Fault.
Yeah. I just had a little brain fart there. But if you look at his accuracy, like in the red zone and with his clean pocket, his red zone accuracy rating was first among all quarterbacks. His clean pocket accuracy rating was 8th. His deep ball accuracy rating was 9th. Like every metric that you want to see regarding accuracy, Dak had. And now that Brandin Cooks is there, who admittedly is older, but has had a 1,000-yard season with every team that he's played with, and it looks like Michael Gallup is healthy, I think that he's going to have a really good season. And it's not just because I am a Cowboys fan, but I think he's going to get those interception problems fixed. And this new offensive coordinator may place some more emphasis on running the ball so that he's not forced to pass, and put himself in bad situations. So I would be more comfortable taking him in the 8th round, but I think he's going to finish as a QB1 for sure.
Yeah, I think Dak's one of those guys that you just can sort of, it sounds crazy, but you can almost rely on him. I know the interceptions were a big problem last year, but you just pointed out they weren't all his fault. He still had the accuracy that we like about Dak Prescott. He's a veteran QB. He's got good weapons. It feels like a pretty safe play taking Dak Prescott, but I think the question that fantasy managers should be asking themselves is safe good enough at the quarterback position? Because last year we saw if you had Jalen Hurts or Mahomes or Josh Allen, you had a ticket to the fantasy playoffs. And if you were facing those guys, you're at a big disadvantage if you were starting Kirk Cousins or Dak Prescott. So do you think he has like a pretty high ceiling as well, or do you think he's more of a safer play?
I think he has a ceiling in some situations, but overall, it's obviously not where Mahomes, Allen, Hurts are. But I think, he's got QB 6 or 7 upside from in certain weeks. I still do think that ceiling is capped because they're going to be a little bit more run heavy with this new offense. And Mike McCarthy has even idiotically said that he doesn't like when they score too fast, so he wants them to run the ball more. So it infuriates me as a fan. I'm like, what? Who cares if you score? We've got a good defense. Go score. But that tells you all that you need to know, I think, about his volume and what they're going to do with him. And safe isn't all that bad, honestly. I would rather, I think, have a safe option and a consistent option than even somebody like Kirk Cousins, who, put up 6 points in week 4 last year. I think that Dak's floor is very, very safe, especially where you're getting him.
Awesome. I think I agree with that wholly, Britt. So it gives me great confidence knowing that we're in the same state of mind and frame of mind when looking at Dak Prescott. Moving on to his wide receivers, fairly sizable addition here with Brandin Cooks. He's currently going in round 8 of drafts. Are you fading, are you drafting, or are you passing on Brandin Cooks there in round 8?
Yeah, I think round 8 is a great ADP for him. We've seen a lot of promising things out of camp. It seems like every time I click on Twitter, there's another Dak to Brandin Cooks highlight in practice. And as I mentioned before, he's had a 1,000-yard season with every single team that he's played with. I think that as that legitimate number 2 option, without a bona fide tight end, now that Dalton Schultz is gone, Dak is going to rely on him heavily. And he could get 1,000 yards easily. And in that 8th round ADP, that is exactly what you want out of this guy. So I'm all aboard with Brandin Cooks.
Yeah, Dak might be the best quarterback he's played with, right, in his career?
I think Probably. You'd almost, you have to say that almost.
Yeah.
He's been on so many teams, it's kind of hard to keep Brandin Cooks straight, but nobody really stands out with him. He's always just kind of been a guy. He's always been consistently undervalued as well. Mm-hmm. He always flies under the radar and then seemingly finds a way to return value no matter where he goes or who he's playing with. And I think that this offense specifically is set up, and they brought him in for a reason. They knew that they had a problem at wide receiver 2, and they knew that he could fill that role.
Yeah, I think Brandin Cooks is sort of a little bit like Tyler Lockett in that sense, where he's just constantly returning ADP value, and people seem to forget about him each year. So if he can stay healthy, I'm totally in line there, Britt. I think he's going to probably return, 5th round value maybe, if he stays, healthy for 14 games, and because he's going to get the volume. He's the number 2 option. He's a good player at the end of the day. I think that's the crux of it. He's a good player. Take him. Moving on to Ceedee Lamb, probably a better play than Brandin Cooks, some might say. Ceedee Lamb, depends on where you're drafting and who you're drafting with, but he's often at that back of the 1st round, start of the 2nd round turn. So talk to me, Britt, when you have like the 11 spot or you have the 10 spot, how are you thinking about Ceedee Lamb? Are you actively targeting him? Are you drafting him, or are you passing on him in favor of somebody else?
Oh yeah, I love Ceedee Lamb at that turn. Love it. I have so many best ball teams with him and then either Amon-Ra St. Brown or Garrett Wilson right there on that back-to-back turn. Mwah, so juicy. But with Lamb, even playing, for 6 games or whatever it was with the backup quarterback last year, he still had 1,359 yards. Even with that low ADOT, he was so good against man coverage. He was able to get yards after the catch. He was a target monster, even, in that tight coverage. They still didn't shy away from him. Now that the coverage is more spread out with Cooks there, I think he's going to have an even better season. And in one of my articles over on Fantasy Alarm, I took him at, I think, plus 600 to have over 1,500 yards. And I really can't get away with that. I think he's going to have a fantastic season.
No homer bias there. right. I think
Uh,
I think
there's not. He's good.
Oh, he's very good. He's I mean, he's up there in the conversation with the Chase and the Jefferson for, if we're talking about dynasty, those like premier dynasty assets. And I think that's a pretty good way to look at your season long teams as well. Like if we're viewing Ceedee Lamb in the same dynasty vein, so to speak, as Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, why wouldn't we feel just as comfortable taking him this year as we are those guys? So I'm totally in line with you. I love taking Ceedee Lamb. Do you if you take Ceedee Lamb, do you actively try and pair him with Dak, like in a season long league in your home league with your buddies?
In a season long, I'm not as much of a fan of stacking because as a homer and noted Cowboys fan, I've done that before. I've stacked in 2019. It worked out phenomenally. I had Dak, I had Amari Cooper, then I even had Zeke. So I had every little bit of that Cowboys offense. Took me to the championship. The very next year, I was like, well, this worked. Let's try it again. And then Dak goes down in week 4 with that ankle injury, and that entire team just went to hell. So I think that you're risking a lot more if you're stacking in season long, because if that one piece goes down, but with a guy like Lamb, I don't think it really matters who the quarterback is. He can still produce, and he's still going to be good. It might knock him down in value a little bit, but he's too good to hold down.
100%. We're in on Ceedee Lamb this year. Breaking news. We like Ceedee Lamb for fantasy football. Okay, moving on to his running mate Michael Gallup. Currently going, it depends on where you're drafting, but roughly the 13th round, so a later pick, a flyer pick. Are you drafting or are you passing on Michael Gallup here late in drafts this year?
I think you could take a stab at him. Like you said, it's 13th round, so he's basically free in your drafts. Mm-hmm. And he has had injury issues, but so is Brandin Cooks. And Brandin Cooks is a little bit older. So if you're looking, for a dart throw, somebody to hold on your bench and maybe plug and play in certain instances, if Cooks does go down, I think that he's a decent pick there. I will say that he kind of worries me as far as his adjusted yards per route run. He ranked, his yards per route run, not even adjusted. It was 1.08. That's a really, really bad number. Some of that may have been because he was coming back from that injury. He might not have been 100%, but just know that if he doesn't produce, that he is going to be a cut candidate very soon. So take the risk know the risk if you're taking him in that 13th round.
Okay, definitely good advice. We've gotten a good idea of the wide receivers. Presumably the top 3. Is there anybody else that's kind of getting buzz in camp that we should be sort of having on our radar on like a super deep sleeper list or anything like that?
We were all so high on Jalen Tolbert last year and it never happened. And he's been getting a lot of buzz in camp. Again, it would be a very, very deep league, dynasty, maybe if he's out there, if people just got sick of him not seeing the field last year and weren't patient with him. With Cooks being so old, again, if something happens to him and Gallup has to move up to that wide receiver 2, he could be the guy out there in 3 receiver sets. So keep an eye on him.
Definitely. I remember last year I took him in one of my home leagues and felt pretty good about him because he was a fairly highly touted rookie coming into the league, and then week 1 healthy scratch. You're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
What a waste of time. But that's a fantasy football. Yeah, that's the fantasy football story. Like, you take stabs on these guys, and your running mate Andrew Cooper gave a really great point when he came on and talked about rookie tight ends, and he talked about the sort of the scratch off model that I think is a really good thing to ascribe to. Don't be afraid, guys, to drop a player earlier than you may want to, because in the case like Jalen Tolbert last year, he was a healthy scratch. That's a pretty good indicator that he's not going to be doing anything the rest of the year. Don't get too attached to these guys. Don't get too attached to Michael Gallup, but take a shot on him in the 13th round, according to Britt Flinn. Okay, so that's the wide receiver court for the Dallas Cowboys. Let's move on to the running back room. I know a couple interesting guys here. The most interesting, of course, Tony Pollard, currently going at the end of the 2nd, early 3rd round. Are you drafting or are you passing on Tony Pollard at that ADP, Britt?
So I actually don't have a lot of Tony Pollard because I'm a little concerned with both his volume, because he's never had over 200 attempts in a single season, And then with Zach Martin holding out and not showing up to camp, the injuries that consistently happen along that line, that worries me. And then him coming back from a broken ankle, that takes a little bit of time. It's not just a broken ankle, it's ligament damage, it's, muscle problems that take a long time to rehab. If you don't rehab correctly, it can cause other injuries to different parts of the body. I also worry about him being that between the tackles guy. I think he works much better outside, and I think that we're going to see his efficiency go down a little bit. That said, I think he's going to be fantastic in real life fantasy, doing what he needs to do. But in the second round, with guys like Derrick Henry and Ramondre Stevenson, I can't take him there. As impressive as he was last year, I need to see a little bit more, and I don't think that he's that bell cow that we want and think that he's going to be.
Yeah, I think it sucks because I'm the Tony Pollard guy in our home dynasty league that we really care about. So I think subconsciously I've been moving him up in my season-long draft board because I know I have him there, whatever. But let's play a little game of this or that real quick, Britt. A little off the cuff here, but that got me thinking. So Tony Pollard, and this is for redraft, of course, this year. Tony Pollard or Travis Etienne? Who are you taking?
I would still take Pollard over Etienne. I think that Bigsby threatens Etienne's workload a lot more.
Okay. And then Tony Pollard and Najee Harris?
That's a tough one. I'm so high. I think I would wait. I would rather wait on Najee. I think that the Steelers bulked up their offensive line. When Najee finally took that plate out of his shoe, his efficiency went up, just dramatically. And a second year with Kenny Pickett in that offense, I think that the offense is going to be a lot more efficient. So I would take Najee at that discount.
Respectfully disagree, but respect.
No, that's fine. I totally get it.
I just don't think Najee's that good. That's my take. I think Jalen Warren's going to take his job this year.
Do you?
I do.
A lot of people have been talking about that. But
yeah, not to turn this into the Najee Harris hour, but it's just one of those things where I think I just don't love taking guys that aren't special talents that early in the draft. And so that's why I'd rather have Pollard over Najee. But all good. I think that's a totally defensible argument too. Like why you should like Najee Harris is because A, the draft capital, B, he is still like a good player. He's not a bad player. And the volume is going to be there, presumably. Coaching staff likes him. Kenny Pickett, another year in the offense, so I'm feeling that. One more of this or that, because this has been kind of fun. Tony Pollard or Jahmyr Gibbs?
Oh, okay. That is super tough because we all know how high I am on Jahmyr Gibbs.
That's why I brought
it came
it
out
up
today. I know it came out today that they're going to have a double-headed backfield, that they're going to incorporate both Gibbs and Montgomery. And I think it was yesterday or the day before, Gibbs has been lining up at wide receiver, even with Montgomery in the backfield. And we typically hear this in training camp. And then when the real season rolls around, they're always in the backfield. But I think Detroit's situation specifically, their lack of wide receiving depth is going to force their hand, and he's going to have to be out there as receiver. Oh, this is so hard. Man. Can I have both? Can I have both?
You can have both. You can have both. Absolutely. You just have to take them at the end of the round 2 and at the start of round 3. But you can have both.
Perfect.
Okay, so moving on to the rest of the running back room for the Cowboys, because if you're saying that Tony Pollard is not going to be getting sort of the in between the tackles work, could be a little bit more banged up than we thought. Deuce Vaughn, is he interesting at all to you, Britt? Because right now he's going undrafted. Give me your vibe on Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah, I think that he's going to have a role as a special teamer. He's obviously has a great story with his dad being on the scouting staff there in Dallas. But at his size, he's 5'5". And that might be with cleats. I don't think that he's big enough to have a real role as far as, fantasy relevance. He is going to do some things on the field, though, because as my husband pointed out yesterday, you can't tackle what you can't see. And in all of those camp highlights, it seems like he's just running under the periphery of all the defenders, and maybe they can't see him. So I think he'll have a couple good things, but for fantasy, I'm passing on him.
maybe they sign Leonard Fournette, or maybe a reunion with Zeke.
I think I was talking to Glenn Colton about this at the FSGA. I think that Zeke comes back. I don't see them going into the season without signing one of these free agents because, again, Pollard just hasn't seen the snaps and the carries. And with pass blocking, which one of these guys is going to pass block? I know that's not relevant for fantasy, but in real life, it's a major factor. And then if Zach Martin holds out, it's even more important. So I think one of these guys definitely gets signed to Dallas, but I'm thinking it'll be Zeke.
I'm kind of upset I didn't get invited to the Britt Flinn and Glenn Colton Cowboys fan powwow at the FSGA. Maybe next year.
Maybe next year. Yeah, it was a good time.
Awesome. Okay, so moving on, last guy I want to talk about on the Cowboys, Jake Fergusson, also going undrafted, a tight end that some people are interested in. Give me your vibe check on Jake Fergusson. Are you drafting or are you passing on him late in your drafts?
Depends on how deep your drafts are. If you're taking like a late round upside stab, like Andrew Cooper always preaches about, the yin and yang, I think that he does fit that yang where he has some really high upside weeks. Luke Schoonmaker, the second round pick, is dealing with a partial tear in his plantar fascia, which is apparently even worse than a full tear, just because of the way that it heals. And it's very not good. And Peyton Hendershot is not a good receiver. His receiving grade is in the toilet. So I think that Dak's reliance on the tight ends historically is going to favor Ferguson. We might not see him have that Dalton Schultz role, but from week to week, and especially in best ball, he's going to have some upside and he's going to surprise people. And you don't even have to draft him. Put him on your watch list, watch and see how he develops, and then spend some fab on him.
100%. Okay, well, anybody else on the Cowboys that we need to talk about before we move on to our last question, Britt?
Oh, so Malik Davis is being talked about as Tony Pollard's backup, but Deuce Vaughn is still going ahead of him in drafts, in most drafts that I've seen, which is really puzzling to me. I'm not a super big fan of Davis. I think he's a little bit inefficient, and that worries me, having a backup that's inefficient, because it's going to force Pollard to be on the field more and subject him to more wear and tear. But it's interesting to me that the fantasy community has Deuce Vaughn above him when the depth chart says otherwise.
I think it was probably all because of that video of him.
It had to have been.
Draft day. Yeah.
Had to have been.
100%. Okay, so last question of the day, Britt. And this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. Give me, and I think I know the answer. But I'm curious if it's changed given what's happened in Tennessee with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins. But give me your number one stance of the summer. What is, if you could give one piece of advice to folks going into their draft day, they watch this video, they say, wow, that Britt Flinn, she was a really sharp lady. What would you give as your one piece of advice to somebody going into their fantasy drafts this year?
Yeah, I have backed off my Treylon Burks stance a little bit with the addition of Hopkins, although I do think that opens him up. The coverage won't be as tough, so he should still be fine, although it might not be the wide receiver one breakout that we've been looking for. But I want people, when they're looking at rookie tight ends, to look at the situation that these tight ends find themselves in. Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta have been so polarizing, and yet we've seen both of them in camp have very, very large roles in the receiving game. And being a rookie didn't stop people from taking Kyle Pitts as a very highly drafted tight end. So why is it suddenly keeping people from drafting Kincaid and Laporta? Just take the totality of circumstances in when you're making these decisions. And I think that Dalton Kincaid is going to buck the trend and finish as a tight end one.
I love it. That's great advice, and that's super, I think, contextual to kind of what's going on in the echo chamber in fantasy scape and fantasy world right now, where everybody's saying, oh, you can't draft a rookie tight end. It's just, haven't you seen Mike Ditka? But it's like, no, you can't just use that as a blanket argument. Like, each situation is unique and each situation is different. And so, I appreciate you bringing that context and that perspective, because I think it's a really smart thing. All right, well, that's it. We did it. Britt, did you have fun?
Yay. It was awesome. It went by very fast.
It did. I know. We could talk football for hours. Thankfully, we're going to be doing it coming up here pretty soon at the Fantasy Football Expo. If you guys don't have tickets yet to the Fantasy Football Expo, you absolutely should get those. It's next week in Canton, Ohio. Britt, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. It was fun to be the interviewer. I know the last couple times we've talked, you've been the one doing the hosting, and so it's fun to sit on this side of the virtual screen. So thank you so much for coming on, Britt, and thank you guys all so much for listening. This has been the Better Fantasy Football Show. Peace out.